Welcome to the Align and Inspire podcast. I'm your host, Laura Monique, teacher and curriculum writer turned program mentor and business strategist for coaches, educators, and mentors, and creator of signature program design. I've helped dozens of established coaches like you create their own signature program that creates incredible transformations and consistent growing revenue in their business. Whether you've created a program that felt off in some way, maybe it felt scattered or heavy or just hard to sell, or you know you're delivering results one-on-one and you want to create a more scalable offer, this is the podcast for you. Here you'll find practical strategies, encouragement, and inspiration to create the offer that you will be known for, that feels aligned, and that you are really meant to create to inspire others. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. In this episode, I want to dive into what I have learned from creating 6 or more program outlines in the month of September. So one of the key ways that I really like to support clients that I've been finding really beneficial recently is to help them kind of co-create program outlines. And I wasn't doing it at the beginning because I don't know about you, but you know when you kind of underestimate the power of your own gifts and the things that you can do really well. And I didn't realize just how powerful and helpful it would be for my clients to do this for them and with them, alongside them. And so in this episode, I want to share a little bit about what that looks like and why it could help you to think about creating a program outline and how to actually do it yourself. So the things that I have noticed, having worked with all of these entrepreneurs at this point, is that oftentimes people tend to have the same kind of challenges come up. So as I list these off, I'd love for you to think about which one rings truest for you. So the first thing that I hear from my clients is they might have the vision, and maybe this is you. You have the vision of what you want to create. You know what you want your program to look like, feel like, and you have that final destination in mind, but actually mapping out the content feels a bit hazy. Like you're not really sure how you'd actually practically do it, like what your sessions would look like, what your actual course content would look like, how you'd run your group programs, like how are people going to actually get results. So that's the first camp. The other is maybe you've been working one-on-one with clients and you know that you get great results one-on-one. But when it comes to creating a group program, you can't really see the vision. You don't really have a clear vision of how it's going to work. And even though you want something more scalable, the actual process of getting it started feels scary and you might not actually go for it because you don't really trust that you can get the transformation in a group setting because you know you can do it one-on-one, but how is it actually going to work? You don't see that vision of how you could really make it happen in a group format. So if any of those relate to you, or maybe you've run a program before and it just didn't feel like you felt really good about how you were creating your content, maybe you sold your program, focused on filling all your spots, and then it came to actually running your sessions and you felt a little bit like, oh my gosh, what am I even going to talk about? If any of those relate to you today and you're thinking about what you can do, or you know you want to create your program outline, but you're not sure how to go about it, I want to share some of the insights that I had working with clients on this and how you can apply it in your own business. So the way that I work with clients right now and how we kind of co-create, just to give some context here that I've been finding really helpful that you could apply with your one-on-one clients too, is if you do any kind of strategy, any kind of writing with your clients, and finding this really helpful, is I pull out a Google Doc, and if I have one-on-one clients, we have one set Google Doc that we use for the duration of all our sessions. If I have like clients who are in signature program design but do some one-on-ones with me as well, we might have a few one-off documents, or we have one straight document that we're always using. So whether or not you are using like that one-on-one method, or even if it's just part of one-on-ones in your group, I find this really helpful to have a Google Doc. And basically I pull out the Google Doc and we kind of go through it together. So people talk to me about what they're saying or what they're envisioning or what they do with their clients. And then I kind of organize the content as they're speaking. So I'm like typing it out, organizing it, putting in the right kind of sections. And then when we're done our session, they can walk away with this Google Doc that's already kind of created for you. So it's so much more powerful, I think, than having, I know you can do this with AI notes, but to me, it's not the specific kind of zone of genius that I have. And you might be feeling that too. But it's so much better than watching just a replay because you have that tangible thing that you can walk away with of this is how your program is outlined and created. So I find it super helpful. I would definitely recommend it if you do any kind of strategy writing with your clients. I'm finding it really, really helpful. And it's one of the things that I can do really well is help you organize your ideas, right? So that's kind of how we kind of co-create it together is my clients will be like, this is what I'm imagining. This is what I want. And I have specific questions that I'll ask them. And then I literally write it as they talk and organize it. Right? So that's kind of how it works. And I want to share the 5 recommendations that I make so that you can think about how to create your program outline as well. So before we get into that though, I want to share why program outlines are so key to creating the right program and to feel confident selling it without wasting your time. So if you are like many of my clients, and I completely related to this as well, is you already have a lot in your business, on your plate, you have a lot of responsibilities, and you don't necessarily want to spend a bunch of time creating a program that you don't sell that feels like a waste of time. But on the other hand, you also want to make sure that you feel prepared and ready for when you actually have clients come into your programs, right? So that's why I love a really strong program outline is you're not wasting your time creating a bunch of videos that no one watches because no one buys your course and it's the wrong offer. Or spending all this time creating programs and courses that people don't actually need because it's not solving their specific problem, which are some of the ways that your course won't sell. But it also gives you a really clear guideline of how you're actually going to be running your program and a clear vision so you feel confident selling it. Oftentimes, I find people focus so much on the selling and the marketing of it, and they don't really know what the program's going to look like. So you might not feel confident selling it, or you get stuck there. You know you want to outline it, but you kind of feel stuck on how to actually create it. And if that's you, that's what we're going to get into in this episode. So it really helps you feel confident, clear on what you're selling, the vision of your program. You can feel way better when you're actually creating that first version, which I call your beta. Let's talk then about the main mistake that I see people making when they go to map out their content and why it can help or why it can really leave you feeling overwhelmed or just stuck in that idea phase. And the crazy thing is, I have talked to people who come from some sort of education background even. So if you're a therapist or a coach, you haven't been running necessarily groups in the past or classes, and this might not necessarily be in your background and you're new to this. But I've even had people who come from the education world, come from training of some sort and have been running groups for a long time, but don't use this strategy. And when I teach it to them, they're like, oh my gosh, that's so much simpler. So I want to make sure that you're doing it as well. And so the mistake that I see people making is that they plan or they outline their content linearly instead of using levels. So they do it linearly instead of using levels. And here's what this looks like. Linear looks like, okay, what am I going to do for session 1? I'm going to talk about this topic. This is what we're going to cover in the content. This is the methods that I'm going to use. These are the modalities. Here's the homework. Here are the action steps I'm going to give my clients. Okay, session 1's done. How am I going to put this in my course content? Okay, maybe that'll be module 1. And this will be the lessons for module 1. Okay, then I'm going to do lesson 2 and then lesson 3. And you kind of do it in this linear fashion where you do the session's going to be about this, the content's going to be this, the homework's going to be this, or the modalities that we're going to use or whatever, the tools that I'm going to use to help my clients implement is going to be this. You plan out session 1, outline session 1, and then you do the next session. And the problem with this is you can quickly get off course because you're not beginning with the end in mind, and you can get lost in all the details of what's your workbook going to look like, and what are your slides going to be, and what's the difference between what you're going to have in your course content and what you're going to do in your sessions with your client. There's so many little details, and linearly doesn't work as easily as in levels. So the next thing I teach is working in levels. And the thing that people think is oh, yes, I need to begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey, right? And you do, but that's not enough. You want to begin with the end in mind, which is where are your clients going? What result do they want? But if you're just planning backwards, to me, that's not enough, because then you're just planning it's not in levels. It's still not going to give the clarity that you want in levels like I teach it. So what I mean by levels is first you think about your session topics or your module topics. Then you're going to think about the actual content that you're going to cover and what you're going to include. Then you might think about the tools that you might use. How are you going to get people implementing? Then you might think about your homework or your workbooks, or if there's anything that people are going to walk away with at the end. So you're thinking about, like, you're not planning, if you're into creating workbooks for your program, you are not planning your workbooks at the beginning. Your workbooks are going to be created when you're actually creating the content itself. But at the beginning, you're mapping out all of the topics that you're going to cover for, like, so say like you're mapping out just live sessions. Like, let's not talk about course content because that gets more complicated. First, you're mapping out all of your course, like your session topics. These are the main topics I'm going to cover in this program. Say it's 6 sessions. You know what session 1's going to be, session 2, session 3, session 4, session 5, session 6. Then you think about, okay, those are my main topics. What are the results that I'm going to focus? Okay, I'm going to choose my results for each one of these. Then you're going to think about, how am I going to get them their results? What content do I need to cover within each session? What modalities, what do I need to actually do with them so that they can get that result? And you do that for each one of your sessions. And then from there, you think about like workbooks, details, what you're going to be saying, activities and exercises that you're going to be doing with your clients. So you want to go, like, I know you're not looking at me as you're listening to this episode, but think about, like, you go from top down level, like the levels, like top level is the topics. Then you're talking about what the results are going to be for each session. Then you're talking about the content that you're going to cover. Then you're talking about the actual action steps and homework. So if you are starting by thinking about your workbook at the beginning of outlining your program, that is when you know you're not planning in levels and you're going to get lost very quickly. Does that make sense? So if you get stuck on this, please send me a message on Instagram because this is what I teach. But you want to think about working in levels. So let's look at the top 5 recommendations I have for you when you are creating your program outline. So that is the first one. You want to work in levels, not linearly. So you're beginning, it's like you're beginning and the end in mind, and then you're going in levels from there. The second big idea is, once you know you're going to work with it in levels, you might be saying, okay, well, how do I actually go to do that, right? So the next main recommendations that I have for you is, you want to start with the problem, and then you think about what is the clear result that they want. So that's the first step of working linearly. What's the problem that you're solving, and what is the result that they want? Now, when you think about this, you want to choose a problem that is highly specific, important, and urgent. Highly specific, important, and urgent. So for example, if I choose a problem that might be important but not urgent, people can say, oh, that's a really important problem. I should do that later. I should do that eventually. Does that make sense? So like, for example, if you are a dietitian and you help families raise balanced eaters, if you say, I'll help your child develop a healthy relationship with food, that is an important problem that you're solving. Like, that is an important thing that people want. It's a values-based thing, but that is not something that is going to help them right away. When you say, hey, if you're fighting with your spouse because you don't know how to approach meal times and your kids aren't eating anything and you're bringing snacks everywhere and you can't go out to eat anywhere because your kids won't eat anything, that is a much more urgent and important problem. So they might want to have a healthy relationship with food, but right now they want their kids to be able to actually eat when they leave, or they want to stop arguing with their spouse, or they want them to eat something other than like raspberries, fishy crackers, and cheese string. That is a more urgent, important, specific problem. Does that make sense? So you want to choose a problem that is very specific, like specific to your person, but it needs to be an urgent and important one. So if we're thinking an urgent problem that's not important, that might, if we're looking at the same thing, it might be like what to make for dinner tonight. That might be an urgent problem, like they don't have anything to make, but it's like, it's not that important because they could just go to McDonald's, or they could just go to, like go get some takeout or something like that. Now, over time, if you're really struggling with meal planning, of course, that is an important problem that you can solve over time. But if it's just tonight, it's like, yeah, that's urgent, but it's not hugely important in the great scheme of things. But you want to choose something that it's like, okay, I want my kid to have a healthy relationship with food. I want my kid to be able to try a variety of foods. But right now they're so picky that it's affecting so many things in my day-to-day life this is urgent and important. So that's the first thing. You want to make sure that your problem is an urgent and important specific problem. Oftentimes I find that if you're coming from a one-to-one lens, you solve so many problems that it's really hard to get specific and choose one. Or you're coming at it from the thing that you teach, and you're not coming at it from the lens of what your person needs. So for me, for example, when I started, I was like, you know what, I really want to help people lesson plan. I really want to help people plan out their programs. That is not what my clients are necessarily looking for. They want to create a program so that they have maybe if this is you, if you're feeling really time crunched because you're stuck in the one-to-ones and you're not able to break out of that and create a more scalable offer. And like you're really feeling crunched for time and you're feeling like you're fizzling out, like your energy is really draining. That's going to be an important problem for you. Or maybe you've tried creating a program before and it was really heavy to deliver. Like it took a lot from you energetically. It didn't make you enough money. It didn't feel scalable. It was taking a lot from you. And you want to create a more scalable version, a more scalable signature program that can make you more money. That's going to be an important problem for you that you want to solve. So I can say that the skill that I have, that I can help you create your program outline and map out your whole program and create something that's really going to help you with the transformation. That's the skill that I bring, but it's going to meet you where you're at with your problem. So it's going to solve your problem. If I just tell entrepreneurs that I can help you unit plan, nobody knows what I'm talking about and no one's interested. But if I match it to, okay, you have a program and it's really taking a lot from you energetically and you're spending all your time on it and you feel capped and you can't bring more people in, I can help you put in the systems, the structure, everything so that your program feels a lot lighter, a lot more doable, a lot more scalable to bring people in. I have the skills to help you with that. That's going to feel a lot more appealing for someone. So you want to make sure that you're starting with a problem and that it's a specific, urgent, and important problem for your clients. That's going to help you with your program outline. We're not coming from the place of trying to outline all of the expertise that you have and trying to put it in a program. The next thing is you want to get clear on the result they want, not on the result that you think they should want or the result they need. You can include that in your program, but you need to make sure you're focusing on the result they want because that's what they're going to be willing to pay for. That's my third recommendation is get clear on the result that they want, because when you start with the problem and then you end with the result, it's going to create this filtering system for you to know what things from your repertoire you're going to include and what you're going to leave for another program, for example. So if we look at me, for example, like one of the skills that I know I have is helping people create systems in their business so they have more time, right? And that was one of the things, and I can help people with that. But when I think about, I used to have that in my program, but I realized I really wasn't meeting my clients where they're at. Once you have run a program for like a year or two and it's really draining you, you might want to have more delivery systems to streamline your whole thing. But if you're like, all I want to focus on right now is I've got 5 people in my program and I don't know what I'm going to offer them content wise, you're not thinking about your systems. Does that make sense? So it kind of creates this filter. Like I know I can teach systems later if you've been with me for a while, but I'm not going to teach it right off the bat. So it gives this filter for what you're going to actually include in your program, because I know you have a ton of things that you could include, but we don't need it all in your program. You want to be a book, not a library. So get clear on the result that they want. The next thing when you're going to outline your content, so the first step, you start with the problem, then the result, then you start to think about what topics you're going to include if we're looking at it linearly, right? Then we want to create results focused content. So this is my 4th recommendation for you, is oftentimes people think about the content that they want to quote unquote cover, but that is not going to be as effective as having a specific result for your actual sessions, your lessons, your modules, whatever it is that you're mapping out right now. Is if you have anything that you create, modules, sessions, lessons, whatever, you want them to be results focused. And the reason this is so important for me is when I was teaching about productivity, because if you've been listening for a little while, you know that I used to help teachers streamline how they were working in the classroom to stop working weekends, to stop working so much. And one of the things that I would teach is you don't want to work on something you want to produce a result. So entrepreneurs do this too. They'll say like, I'm going to work on my landing page. I'm going to work on my funnel. I'm going to work on my email nurture sequence, whatever it is that you're working on. But if you just say, I'm going to work on this thing, you have no idea if you have completed it or not. So you might be working hard, but you don't necessarily have the results to show for it. So instead, you want to create a result. So like right now, I am creating the podcast episode that's going to go out in a few weeks. This is the result I'm going to have at the end of this work block, right? And so first off, do that in your work, but also in everything that you do with your clients, you want it to be results focused. It needs to have a result at the end. So when you go to outline your content, you choose the program problem, then the result that it's going to provide people. You start to think about your topics, but then you think about what are these topics going to produce result-wise to get you to that final result. So everything that you create in your outline should have a result focus. And a tip to know if your content is results focused is if there is an action word on it. So for example, one of the results when I was creating my program outline for a new program that I'm going to be starting very soon that I'm going to be sharing about shortly is how to launch your beta, how to launch your first ever group program, is when I started to outline it, I knew that I need to help people grow their audience or build their audience, get in front of the right people. But I'm not going to say audience in that, because what does audience mean? Do we have it? Do we not? I'm going to get really specific on the result that I know people need, which is how are you going to get in front of the right people so you can launch your small, or not, it doesn't have to be small, but you're going to launch your first program. So it doesn't need to be a large audience, but it needs to be the right people. How are you going to get in front of them and actually start to build or grow your email list? Notice those are verbs. So this is such a teacher thing, they're verbs. So they're action oriented. So you know that people have done it or they haven't. So it's results oriented. If you grow your email list, you see that result at the end. So that's part of the outline that I'm creating to help you launch your first group program. And then the last element to think about is to have a session rhythm. So this is actually outside of the scope of creating a program outline. But the thing I find is sometimes people have this outline. They're like, great, Lauren, what do I actually talk about in my sessions? And I was like, but you have your outline. How do you not know? And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not connecting these things for you. So the thing you need to have is whether or not you've mapped out your session content, you need to have an idea of what you're actually going to be going through in your sessions. And the thing that's going to be especially helpful for you is to have a session rhythm. And the funny thing is, when I first started doing this, I think I was about 15, and I was tutoring on the side, and I was tutoring English or French, like high school students, a little bit lower, who they were learning the language. And I remember talking to my mom and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got these sessions with these students and I don't have a clue how I'm actually going to go about, like, what am I going to talk about with them? And my mom said, oh, you need to, she's a teacher too. You need to have a rhythm, an outline for how you're actually going to, or a routine that you follow when you're going to work with those students. And that was the first time I did it when I was about 15. And then I used it for teaching dance. I used it for running summer camps when I was coordinating, like running the whole summer camp, when I was teaching. I used it for everything when I create my programs, my online programs. And now when I teach people to how to create online programs, it's still the same principle, and it's to have a session rhythm. So if you are in my program, Signature Program Design, you'll start to see this flow of how I do it. But I always have kind of a flow that I follow, which makes running the sessions much easier for me, thinking about how I'm going to map out the content. And it helps my clients too, because they have a sense of what's coming. It's not like some random thing every time. So the way that I teach rhythms, I will give you an example of how I run my sessions, but when I help you do it, I modify it to work for you. So I'll give you a couple examples. So the way that I run my sessions is I always start with session, like with wins. So everyone kind of shares what's a win or progress that you've made in the last week or so. So we'll start with wins. Then I go and outline. I show the outline. This is what we're going to be talking about today in our session today. And here's the goal for today's session. Then it depends on if I'm doing some sort of teaching content or I'm just doing coaching, but we'll use a teaching content as an example, then I might teach a little bit of something. Then we might do an exercise to actually implement it. It might be writing about it, journaling. It might be talking about it, breakout rooms, whatever. And then I do some coaching, and then we wrap with a takeaway from today's session. So it's always the same kind of flow. The way it might work for you is, say you're a therapist and maybe you do like somatic work. Maybe at the beginning of your sessions with your one-on-one clients, you always have them check in with their bodies and see how they're feeling in their bodies and ground them in the present moment. Maybe that's how you always start with your one-on-one, so you can bring that into your groups. That's the beginning of your group rhythms. So the last recommendation that I would make for you is, once you have your program outline your session rhythm, how you're going to always run your sessions. So then you can really imagine, this is what my group calls are going to look like. And I did this with one of my clients recently, and she was feeling really frozen. She is like a beautiful therapist, like so knowledgeable and helpful. You can tell she's really good at what she does. And she said, like, I just don't know how I'm going to do this in a group. And when we created her program outline and her rhythm, she felt this weight lift off her shoulders, because the thing was, she just didn't have a clear vision and picture of how it was going to work in a granular day-to-day way. And once she created her session rhythm, it made a massive impact for her. And now she's going to be able to move forward on creating that next step of her program. So I would highly, highly recommend having a session rhythm. Okay, let's recap what we have talked about today. So program outlines. Outlining your program is going to make you feel so much more confident, and it's going to make it so much easier to sell your program without wasting your time, because you're not over creating, but you still have a really clear guideline of where you're going with your clients. The mistake that I see people making is they plan session by session linearly, but you want to plan in levels instead, so that it's really going to be results focused. The 5 recommendations that I'm making for you when you're creating your program outline is, like I said, start with levels, don't plan linearly, start with a problem, an urgent, important, and specific problem. Get clear on the result that they want, not the result that you want for them. And these 2 anchors are going to filter from there what content you're going to include and what content you're going to exclude. Then you want to create results-focused content and have a session rhythm. So like I said earlier on, I am going to be launching something brand new that I've never done before, that is going to be about how to create your first group program, how to just really get it off the ground, really get it going. And I'm going to be launching that very soon. So stay tuned. If you want to be on the wait list for it, you can send me a message. It's brand new. I haven't created any of the background, but I do want to let you know, if you are listening to the podcast, you can be first to know, and I will add you to the wait list. So you can send me a message on Instagram saying wait list for the program, the Launch Your Program, your first group program. So let me know on Instagram and I'll add you to the waitlist, but I will be providing lots more details in the coming episodes. So I hope that this was helpful for you. Please, please, please go out and create those program outlines, and I will see you on next week's episode.